There is a particular kind of woman Hollywood has never known how to handle. Not the ingenue discovering herself under studio lights. Not the starlet carefully managing her image through carefully choreographed interviews. Not the actress whose entire identity has been constructed and maintained by a team of publicists, stylists, and image consultants working around the clock to ensure the world sees exactly what they want it to see. No, the woman Hollywood has never known how to handle is the one who simply refuses to play the game entirely. The one who walks into rooms without apology, lives her life without explanation, and exists in the public eye on her own terms, even when the public eye refuses to return the courtesy. Keely Smith is that woman. For nearly 3 decades, she has stood beside one of the most recognizable men on the planet. Brosnan, the Irish actor who became synonymous with suave sophistication, cinematic charisma, and the kind of masculine elegance that Hollywood has always known how to sell. His face launched a franchise. His name opened doors. His image was carefully constructed, lovingly maintained, and enthusiastically consumed by audiences around the world who wanted exactly what he represented. He was, in the most complete sense of the phrase, a movie star. And movie stars exist in a particular kind of protected universe where age is forgiven, imperfections are romanticized, and the passage of time is treated as something that only adds depth and distinction to an already compelling story. Keely did not live in that universe. Despite being accomplished, intelligent, professionally established, and deeply committed to causes that genuinely matter, she was never extended the same courtesies. From the moment she became publicly associated with Brosnan, the conversation about her was filtered almost entirely through a single, narrow, profoundly unfair lens. Her body, not her work, not her character, not the decades she spent advocating for environmental causes and marine conservation. Not her career as a journalist and documentary filmmaker. Not the emotional strength she demonstrated raising a family while supporting a man who had already known tremendous loss. Just her body. Just the way she looked. Just whether or not she met the invisible, ever-shifting standard that the entertainment world applies so ruthlessly to women who dare to exist in public view. And now, after years of silence, after years of enduring commentary that would have broken lesser spirits, the conversation is shifting again. Recent public appearances have shown Keely looking noticeably different. A transformed figure, a renewed energy, a presence that has sent the same media outlets that once reduced her to punchlines scrambling to recalibrate their language. The headlines that once mocked are now admiring. The commentary that once criticized is now celebrating. And the woman at the center of all of it has said, characteristically, almost nothing. That silence tells its own story, and is a far more interesting one than anything the headlines have managed to capture. To understand Keely Smith, you have to begin before Brosnan. You have to begin with a woman who built her own identity, carved her own professional path, and established her own voice long before the world decided to define her primarily through her relationship to a famous man. Keely Smith was born in Fountain Valley, California, in 1963. She grew up in an era when the opportunities available to women in media were expanding but still constrained, when ambition was something women were expected to temper politely, and when the entertainment industry was perhaps even more demanding in its physical expectations than it is today. Despite all of that, Keely pursued a career that placed her directly in front of cameras not as an actress performing someone else's story, but as a journalist telling the world's stories. She worked as a television presenter, an entertainment reporter, a news correspondent, and eventually a documentary filmmaker with a particular passion for environmental subjects. Her work took her to remote corners of the world. She reported on marine ecosystems, wildlife conservation, and the complex intersection of human activity and natural environments. She was not someone who fell into environmentalism as a fashionable cause. She pursued it with the sustained dedication of someone who genuinely understood what was at stake. Her documentary work on gray whales in particular demonstrated a depth of commitment to natural conservation that went far beyond celebrity advocacy. This is important context that the public conversation about Keely almost always omits. When strangers on the internet spent years composing cruel commentary about her appearance, they were directing that cruelty at a woman who'd spent those same years doing genuinely meaningful work. While anonymous voices debated whether she deserved to stand beside her husband, Keely was producing journalism, raising children, and advocating for ocean conservation with the kind of consistent, unglamorous dedication that rarely generates headlines, but defines character more completely than any red carpet appearance ever could. She was, in the fullest sense, accomplished before the world decided to reduce her. That reduction says everything about the culture that performed it, and nothing about the woman who endured it. To understand the marriage, you also have to understand Pierce Brosnan before Keely. Because the man she chose to build a life with was not the effortlessly charming figure that cinema audiences adored. He was something considerably more complicated. He was a man who had already experienced profound loss, and who carried the particular kind of grief that does not resolve with time, but instead becomes woven into the fabric of who you are. Pierce Brosnan was born in County Meath, Ireland, in 1953. His early life was defined by absence rather than presence. His father left when he was still an infant. His mother, seeking employment as a nurse, moved to England when Pierce was still a young child, leaving him in the care of his grandparents. He grew up knowing what it meant to be left behind. He learned emotional self-sufficiency not as a philosophy, but as a necessity. The independence that would later translate so effortlessly onto screen was forged in the genuine solitude of a childhood where the people you depended on simply were not there. When fame came, it came with the particular intensity that attaches itself to a certain kind of physical presence combined with genuine talent. Pierce Brosnan became a recognizable name first through the television series Remington Steele in the early 1980s, a role that introduced him to American audiences and established the template of the charming, sophisticated leading man that would define his public image for decades. But the real breakthrough, the cultural moment that transformed recognition into genuine icon status, came later with his casting as James Bond. Before all of that, however, Pierce had already built and already lost the first life he had constructed for himself. His marriage to actress Cassandra Harris was the relationship that anchored him during his rise to prominence. Cassandra was not simply a romantic partner. She was the foundation of a family that Pierce had deliberately and lovingly constructed. He adopted her 2 children from a previous marriage, Charlotte and Christopher, giving them his name and his full commitment. Together, they had a son, Sean. This was the life Pierce had built. This was what stability looked like for a man who had grown up surrounded by absence. Then came the diagnosis that would dismantle everything. Cassandra was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. What followed was years of watching someone you love fight a disease that does not negotiate and does not yield to the force of hope alone. Pierce was present through it all, through the surgeries and the treatments and the endless cycle of hope and disappointment that terminal illness inflicts on everyone it touches. Cassandra died in 1991, leaving Pierce alone with 3 children and a grief so total that it fundamentally altered how he understood the world. The public saw the composed, handsome actor. The studios saw the leading man whose career was ascending. What neither the public nor the studios could see was a man who had just spent years watching his wife die and who was now responsible for 3 children navigating the kind of loss that shapes a person permanently. The grief Pierce carried was not something he performed for cameras. It was private, total, and enduring. This is the man Keely Smith met on a beach in Mexico in 1994. Not the Bond actor. Not the celebrity. A grieving father. A man who had loved completely and lost devastatingly. A human being who was still learning how to carry what life had placed on his shoulders. The meeting between Keely Smith and Pierce Brosnan was neither engineered nor anticipated. She was working as a television correspondent, present in Mexico, on a professional assignment. He was there on what was supposed to be a personal break. The encounter was accidental in the way that the most consequential meetings in a life so often are. Neither of them arrived at that moment intending to find anything other than what they had come for. What developed between them was slow and deliberate, a quality that distinguished it fundamentally from the kind of high-velocity, publicly performed romances that Hollywood tends to generate. Pierce was not ready to be reckless with his heart. He had 3 children who needed consistency and stability above everything else. He had already experienced the annihilation that comes when a family falls apart. He was not willing to introduce chaos into lives that had already sustained enough disruption. Keely understood this. She was not positioning herself as a replacement for what Pierce had lost. She was simply present, willing to meet the reality of his situation honestly, and without the kind of romantic mythology that tends to make relationships fragile. She embraced his children as real people rather than complications. She understood that loving Pierce meant accepting the full inheritance of his life, the grief, the history, the ongoing responsibility of parenting 3 children who had already lost their mother. They built their relationship around function rather than fantasy. Shared responsibilities. Genuine partnership. The kind of daily commitment that is far less photogenic than the dramatic gestures that cinema presents as the true evidence of love, but far more durable. Before they ever married, they had already become parents together. Their son Dylan was born in 1997, followed by their daughter Paris in 1998. They formalized their marriage in 2001 on a castle in Ireland in a ceremony that was private and personal rather than orchestrated for public consumption. The marriage that followed was one that the couple deliberately kept as protected as they could manage given Pierce's level of fame. They raised their children. They pursued their respective professional interests. Keely continued her environmental advocacy work. Pierce continued making films. They appeared at public events together with the ease of people who are genuinely comfortable in each other's company rather than performing comfort for an audience. And yet, despite all of this, despite the obvious authenticity of a relationship built on genuine partnership and shared values, the public conversation about Keely remained stubbornly, cruelly reductive. The work she had done, the family she had helped hold together, the advocacy she had sustained for decades, all of it disappeared behind the single, obsessive focus on how her body looked. It would be convenient to describe the media treatment of Keely Shea Smith as a product of a specific moment, a particular cultural climate that has since shifted. It would be reassuring to frame it as a historical artifact, something the world has moved decisively past. But that framing would not be honest. The cruelty directed at Keely was sustained, escalating, and normalized across decades. It was not an aberration. It was a pattern. And the pattern reveals something deeply uncomfortable about how women in public life continue to be treated regardless of their accomplishments, their character, or the genuine substance of their lives. The commentary began in earnest after the births of her children. Pregnancy changes bodies. This is biological fact. Postpartum weight gain, thyroid complications, the hormonal shifts that accompany and follow childbirth, these are realities that millions of women navigate as private experiences. For Keely, they became public entertainment. The tabloid industry, always searching for material, found in her body a story that required no reporting, no investigation, no actual journalism. It required only the willingness to reduce a human being to her physical dimensions and invite the world to form opinions about those dimensions. What made this particularly insidious was the double standard operating so visibly alongside it. Pierce Brosnan was aging in the same years that Keely was being dissected for aging. His hairline changed. His face acquired lines. His body shifted in the ways that bodies inevitably shift across decades of living. And the cultural response to his aging was warm, even celebratory. His gray temples were described as distinguished. His experience was framed as depth. The passage of time was presented as something that had only enhanced what he offered, as if aging for men is an accretion of value, while aging for women is a forfeiture of it. This double standard is not new. It is one of the most thoroughly documented phenomena in research on media representation and gender. What was notable about the Brosnan case was simply how nakedly it operated, how little effort anyone seemed to make to disguise it. The same outlets that were rhapsodizing about Pierce's distinguished silver hair were simultaneously running unflattering photographs of Keely with captions that functioned as barely coded insults. The contrast required no analysis. It announced itself. What the cruelty never reckoned with was the full picture of who Keely was during those years. While the internet was producing content about her body, she was raising children. She was supporting a man still processing grief. She was producing documentary work on marine conservation. She was engaging in environmental advocacy that required actual knowledge, sustained effort, and genuine commitment. None of that generated the traffic that a cruel headline about her appearance could generate. And so the media made its calculation, as media always does, and Keely became a target rather than a subject. Pierce Brosnan's response to all of this was consistent and genuinely admirable in its own way. He did not distance himself from his wife when the commentary became hostile. He did not offer careful media-trained non-answers that technically expressed support while leaving room for the critics to feel validated. He said plainly and repeatedly that he loved his wife. He said she was beautiful. He said her curves were something he loved rather than tolerated. He repeated these statements over years, across multiple interviews, in the face of mockery that suggested his perspective was somehow suspect, as if a man who genuinely loved his wife without conditions was an anomaly that required explanation. Each time Pierce said these things, the internet found a way to undermine the sincerity. Some suggested it was performance. Others suggested it was denial. The idea that a man might simply love his wife, genuinely and without reservation, and find her beautiful exactly as she was, seemed to exceed the imagination of a culture that had decided Keely's body was a problem. But Pierce kept saying it anyway. And in the consistency of those statements, across years and through sustained mockery, there was something that deserved recognition regardless of how the world chose to receive it. Keely Shea Smith gave the world very little to work with. This was not passivity. It was a deliberate posture, a decision made early and maintained consistently that she would not allow the public conversation about her body to become something she participated in. She did not release statements defending herself. She did not conduct interviews designed to contextualize her appearance. She did not explain her weight, her health, her choices, or her feelings about the commentary that surrounded her. She simply continued to live her life. This silence was frequently misread. A culture accustomed to public figures performing their wounds for the entertainment of audiences interpreted Keely's quiet as permission. If she is not objecting, the logic went, she must not mind. If she is not fighting back, perhaps the commentary is acceptable. The cruelty intensified in part because it met no visible resistance. And the absence of visible resistance was itself the result of a particular kind of dignity that the cruel simply could not recognize as strength. In the rare interviews she gave during these years, Keely was careful and clear about where she stood. She communicated, without elaboration, that she did not hide from her body. She did not dress to minimize herself. She did not shrink physically or metaphorically to accommodate the world's preferences. She wore what she wanted to wear. She appeared where she wanted to appear. She carried herself with the ease of a woman who had decided that her worth was not located in the approval of people who had never met her and never would. This is a harder position to maintain than it sounds. The pressure that comes with sustained public criticism of your physical appearance is not abstract. It accumulates. It finds its way into daily life in ways that